Welcome to Storyverse, where stories speak and you learn English naturally.
Chapter 1. The Beautiful Beginning. In the summer heat of New York, 1892, the story of Dr. Hawley Harvey Crippen and a young woman named Cora Turner began. A story that would travel far beyond their small lives and end in a house that would forever be whispered about. He was 30, quiet and educated, working long hours in a hospital where illness and sorrow filled every hallway. She was 19, lively, ambitious, and burning with dreams that had no boundaries. When they met, something gentle but dangerous sparked between them. Cora was drawn to his calm manners and the way he spoke with patience and warmth. Crippen, in turn, was enchanted by her laughter, bright, restless, and full of life. Within 6 months, they were married. For a time, it seemed like happiness had chosen their home. At first, their life in New York was modest but content. Crippen continued working at the hospital, while Cora dreamt of a stage, of glittering lights and music. She believed she was born to be seen, not to fade into the quiet rooms of an ordinary life. It was she who convinced her husband to leave the hospital and join a medicine company, a job that promised more money and a touch of prestige. Crippen agreed, not because he desired wealth, but because he wanted her to smile again. He watched her chase her dreams with all her heart. He paid for her singing lessons, encouraged her performances, and applauded even when her voice faltered. But the truth, unkind and undeniable, was that Cora's talent was not enough for the fame she desired. Her voice lacked the strength to carry her far, and as the years passed, her frustration grew like a shadow that refused to leave. When the opportunity came to move to London, Cora insisted they take it. "England will love me," she said, her eyes glittering with hope. Crippen followed her across the ocean, always the loyal companion, always believing that peace would follow, once her dreams found a place to rest. But in London, dreams turned to dust. Cora sang in small theaters, always hopeful, always disappointed. Her name never appeared in bold letters, and the applause she longed for remained faint and polite. Crippen, unable to work as a doctor in England because of his American training, continued with the medicine company and eventually opened a small London office for them. In 1905, they moved into a new home, 39 Hilldrop Crescent. The house was elegant, quiet, and filled with potential. But inside those walls, something invisible had already begun to decay. Cora changed. The once hopeful girl became restless, cruel, and sharp with her words. She mocked her husband for his softness, for his patience, for not being the man she imagined herself beside. Money slipped through her fingers as she bought dresses, jewels, and gifts for herself, always wanting more, always needing to be admired. Crippen endured it all, his love fading into something quieter, something that looked more like endurance than devotion. Their dinners became silent, their glances became sharp, and every evening, when laughter echoed faintly from the streets outside, it only reminded them of what they had lost. Neighbors saw them together, but never smiling. They noticed Cora's temper, the way she shouted in the garden, or slammed the door when things didn't go her way. They noticed Crippen, too, small, tired, his shoulders carrying something invisible and heavy. What they didn't see, however, was how much of himself he had already given away, piece by piece, day by day, until there was almost nothing left of the man who had once fallen in love under the bright New York sky. And so, the house at number 39 began its quiet watch. Behind its neat curtains and polished doors, it hid the sounds of a marriage unraveling, not in storms, but in silence. Love had turned into resentment, and resentment into fear. No one outside could yet imagine that one day, this very house, so ordinary, so proper, would become one of the most infamous addresses in all of London, because what began as a beautiful beginning was already on its way to a dark and dreadful end. Chapter 2. The Secret Within the Walls. The years at 39. Hilldrop Crescent were not kind to the Crippens. What had once been a marriage of promise had turned into a daily performance of bitterness and control. The neighbors heard it. Muffled shouts behind the closed windows, the sharp ring of Cora's voice echoing through the quiet street, and the occasional crash of something breaking against the wall. Cora had become a woman of pride and cruelty. Her laughter was no longer soft and charming, but harsh, edged with anger. She spoke to her husband as if he were a servant rather than a man who once loved her. She mocked him for his failures, for his lack of courage, for the dullness of his world compared to hers. Yet even in her cruelty, she remained the center of his small, trapped universe. But love, when humiliated long enough, begins to change shape. It turns into something dangerous, something desperate to feel alive again. And in 1907, life brought another presence into 39 Hilldrop Crescent. A young secretary named Ethel Leneve. She was gentle, quiet, and looked at Crippen with the kind of admiration he hadn't seen in years. Her kindness felt like sunlight in a house that had long been locked in winter. Ethel listened when he spoke. She believed in him when Cora did not. And slowly, almost without realizing it, Crippen began to fall in love again, not with passion or youth, but with the soft promise of peace. Their relationship began in whispers, behind office doors, in letters that trembled with guilt. Ethel knew he was married, but she also knew he was a man starved of affection. She dreamed of a simple life with him, away from the violence of Cora's world. When Cora found out, everything broke. It was December 1909, a cold, hard winter in London. She had discovered the affair through a letter, or perhaps a careless glance exchanged between her husband and his secretary. What mattered was the fury that followed. That night, her screams tore through the house. The argument shook the walls. Cora threatened to leave him, to take everything he owned, to destroy his name and his lover's life. "You'll regret this," she shouted. "I'll make sure you lose everything. Everything you love." Neighbors recalled hearing raised voices, but few dared to intervene. And then, silence. On the evening of January 31st, 1910, friends of Cora, Paul and Clara Martinetti, came to dinner. They later remembered the atmosphere as tense, suffocating. Cora was restless, sharp-tongued. Crippen seemed distant and pale. They argued openly at the table, and the Martinettis, uncomfortable, left earlier than planned. It was the last time anyone ever saw Cora Crippen alive. In the days that followed, the story began to twist. Crippen told neighbors and friends that Cora had gone to America to look after a sick relative. The excuse seemed strange, sudden, unannounced, but few questioned it. He was calm, polite, even convincing. Weeks passed. Letters from Cora never came, but her jewelry, her beloved rings and trinkets, began appearing in pawn shops across London. Crippen sold them quietly, explaining that Cora had no need for them anymore. And then, in March, Ethel and Eve moved into the house at number 39. The neighbors were shocked. Cora's friends were furious. Whispers began to spread across the street. Whispers of betrayal, of secrets, of something that didn't feel right. Why had no one heard from Cora? Why did her husband seem so calm? And what exactly had happened on that cold night after the dinner party? When Crippen finally told his friends that Cora had died in America, no one believed him. There was no letter, no telegram, no proof. Just his quiet voice and Ethel's nervous smile. Soon, word reached Scotland Yard, and Inspector Walter Dew came knocking at the door of house number 39. He was polite but curious, asking simple questions with heavy meaning. Crippen answered calmly, admitting to lies but insisting that Cora had simply left him, gone to America with another man. The inspector left that day without evidence, but something in his instincts whispered otherwise. The air inside the house had felt wrong, too still, too quiet, as if it was holding its breath. What no one knew then was that beneath the polished floors of 39 Hilldrop Crescent, beneath the carpets and the wooden boards, something was waiting to be found. Something that would turn this quiet home into one of the most horrifying crime scenes in England's history. Chapter 3. The Escape Across the Sea. The morning Inspector Dew left house number 39, a cold wind followed him down Hilldrop Crescent. He had no proof, no confession, only a feeling, the kind of heavy instinct that years of police work carve into a man's bones. Inside the house, Dr. Crippen sat in silence, staring at the closed door long after the inspector had gone. He told himself it was over, that the danger had passed. But the truth pressed against his chest like a hand refusing to let him breathe. He could feel it, the weight of what lay beneath his feet, buried under the floors of his own home. That night, he turned to Ethel. Her eyes were wide with fear, her hands trembling as she clutched his arm. "We must leave," he whispered. "We'll start again, somewhere far away, where no one knows us, and the past can't follow." And so, under the gray skies of July 1910, Dr. Crippen and Ethel Leneve vanished. They boarded a train to Holland, then moved quietly through Brussels and Belgium, their faces hidden by false smiles and borrowed names. For a while, it seemed they might escape the shadow that had grown behind them. But fate, like truth, has its own way of traveling. When Inspector Dew returned to Crippen's office on July 11th, he found it locked, the blinds drawn. The neighbors said the doctor had gone abroad for business. Something inside Dew snapped into certainty. Within hours, he ordered a full search of the house at 39 Hilldrop Crescent. The men dug through the cellar, the dark, damp heart of the house. The air was thick, the walls cold with years of silence. And then, under a layer of brick and clay, a constable's shovel struck something soft. The smell that rose from the ground silenced them all. Wrapped in cloth and dust lay what was left of a woman. No face, no voice, no name. But the truth was unmistakable. Cora Crippen had never gone to America. She had never been sick, never left her home. She had been here all along, under the floors of the house that had once echoed with her laughter. The news broke across London like thunder. Every newspaper headline screamed the same name: the murder at Hilldrop Crescent. By the time Crippen read about the discovery in a Belgian newspaper, It was already too late. His hands shook as he held the page. He realized then that his life, his freedom, was over. But he was not ready to surrender. Not yet. He bought 2 tickets aboard the SS Montrose, a ship bound for Quebec, Canada. Ethel disguised herself as a 16-year-old boy, pretending to be his son. Together, they became Mr. and Master Robinson, a quiet father and son seeking a new life across the sea. The Montrose set sail on July 20th, 1910. For a few brief days, the ocean seemed endless, peaceful, safe. But even there, among the waves, the past was catching up to them. Captain Henry Kendall, a sharp and observant man, had seen their faces before, in the newspapers, beneath the bold headline of murder. He noticed the small things, the way the boy held the man's hand too tightly, the faint trace of a recently shaved mustache on Mr. Robinson. The more he watched them, the more certain he became. And then, for the first time in history, a message crossed the Atlantic through the invisible air, a wireless telegram sent from the ship to London. Have strong suspicions that Dr. Crippen and companion are aboard. Request instructions. The message reached Inspector Dew, who was already aboard a faster ship, the Laurentic, heading for Canada. The newspapers followed every moment of the chase, printing maps, speculations, and imagined dialogues. All of England was watching as the world's first manhunt at sea unfolded. When the Montrose finally docked in Quebec, Crippen stepped onto the deck, unaware that his story was about to end. There, waiting among the crowd, stood Inspector Dew, calm, composed, and unshakable. "Good morning, Dr. Crippen," he said softly. "The game is over." Ethel burst into tears. Crippen lowered his head. There was nowhere left to run. They were taken back to London, greeted not by silence, but by the roar of 1,000 voices and flashing headlines. The trial that followed lasted only 3 days. The jury heard how he had poisoned his wife with hyoscine, dismembered her body, and buried her beneath his own home. On November 23rd, 1910, Dr. Hawley Harvey Crippen was hanged in Pentonville Prison. Ethel Leneve was found not guilty, but she lived the rest of her life under a different name, a quiet ghost in a world that never forgot her face. And the house, at number 39, Hilldrop Crescent, remained standing for years after, silent, ordinary, yet forever touched by what had happened beneath its floors. Because some houses never forget. And this one, they said, still remembers every sound, every lie, and every heartbeat that once lived within its walls.